The Imperial Dawn hovered above the dense forests of Delvaris, a remote planet on the edge of the Andralis sector. It was a quiet backwater world, insignificant to the broader affairs of the Galactic Empire, except for its rumored role as a haven for insurgents and outlaws. Captain Ral Thorne stood on the bridge of his patrol ship, his sharp gray eyes scanning the data feed from the planetary surface below. "Captain, our probes have detected a life sign near the abandoned colony in the Southern Valley, Lieutenant," Dara Vex reported, her tone efficient and clipped. She was Thorne's second in command, known for her sharp instincts and unyielding dedication to the Empire. Human, Thorne asked, his interest piqued. "Confirmed one individual. No visible weapons or support." Thorne frowned. A lone human in such a remote location was unusual. The Empire had outlawed unsanctioned military activity years ago, and humans who operated outside the law were either desperate or dangerous. "Prepare a landing party," Thorne ordered. "We'll bring him in for questioning. If he's clean, we'll let him go. If not," his voice trailed off, the unspoken implication clear. The Imperial Dawn descended through the atmosphere, its engines humming as it settled above the treetops. A detachment of heavily armed Imperial troopers, led by Thorne and Dara, deployed to the surface in an armored shuttle. The squad moved swiftly through the dense underbrush, their boots crunching against the loamy soil. Ahead, in the clearing of an old settlement, stood the target. He was tall and lean, his weathered features framed by short, dark hair. He wore a simple utility jacket and cargo pants, the attire of someone used to survival in rough environments. His hands were raised in the universal gesture of surrender, but the faint smirk on his face set the troopers on edge. "Name," Thorne demanded, his blaster aimed at the man's chest. The man's green eyes sparkled with amusement as he replied, "Marcus Kane." "Rank and affiliation?" Marcus tilted his head slightly, as if pondering how much to reveal. "Formerly Sergeant, Earth Federation Corps." "Earth Federation," Thorne sneered, "that's ancient history. The Federation is dead, and so is its authority. What are you doing on Delvaris?" Living, Marcus replied nonchalantly. "You know, like people do. Don't play games with me," Thorne snapped. "We've intercepted communications indicating insurgent activity in this area. You've got 10 seconds to explain your presence, or we'll assume you're hostile." Marcus chuckled softly, a sound that grated on Thorne's nerves. "Hostile, not me. I'm just a guy trying to stay out of trouble." "Secure him," Thorne barked. 2 troopers approached, their weapons trained on Marcus. They snapped energy restraints onto his wrists, the glowing cuffs locking him in place. Marcus didn't resist, but the amused glint in his eyes remained. As they led him toward the shuttle, Dara stepped closer to Thorne. "Sir, something about this man feel off." Thorne glanced at her, his expression skeptical. "He's just another rogue soldier trying to stay under the radar. We'll let intelligence deal with him." "I'm not so sure," Dara said, lowering her voice. "He surrendered too easily. It's almost like he wanted to be caught." Thorne waved her concerns away. "We've got him in custody. If he's hiding something, we'll find out soon enough." The shuttle ascended back to the Imperial Dawn, its engines roaring as it breached the atmosphere. Marcus sat silently in the holding area, flanked by armed guards. His expression was unreadable, but his mind was far from idle. "The interrogation begins." Back aboard the Imperial Dawn, Marcus was escorted to a sterile interrogation chamber. The room was featureless, save for a single chair bolted to the floor and a table with built-in restraints. A bright overhead light cast sharp shadows across Marcus's face as he was secured in place. Dara entered the room, carrying a datapad loaded with Marcus's records. Or what little the Empire had managed to piece together. She was alone, her blaster holstered but within easy reach. She preferred to handle interrogations herself, finding that too many officers relied on intimidation without understanding their subjects. "Marcus Kane," she began, her voice steady, age 35, formerly Sergeant, Earth Federation Corps. Dishonorably discharged following allegations of misconduct during the Mars Rebellion. Since then, your record is sparse. No official residence, no employment records, and yet you've been spotted across multiple sectors. Care to explain? Marcus leaned back as far as his restraints allowed, his smirk returning. What's to explain? A man's gotta eat. By taking mercenary contracts, Dar pressed. We've linked your movements to high-profile assassinations, disruptions of Imperial supply lines, and the deaths of at least 2 Imperial officers. Who are you working for? No one, Marcus said simply. Then why were you on Delvaris? Retirement, Marcus replied, his tone casual. Dara's patience began to wear thin. You expect me to believe that a dishonorably discharged soldier with a trail of bodies behind him just decided to retire on a backwater planet? Spare me the lies. Marcus's eyes hardened, the faintest flicker of something dangerous crossing his expression. Believe what you want, Lieutenant. The truth doesn't care about your opinion. Dara set the datapad on the table. Leaning forward, Oyuri not fooling anyone. You're a trained killer, and the Empire doesn't take kindly to threats. The more you cooperate, the easier this will be for you. Marcus met her gaze. Unflinching, let me give you some advice, Lieutenant. The Empire loves to throw around words like threat and justice, but you've got no idea who or what you're dealing with. Her jaw tightened. But before she could press further, Thorne's voice crackled over her communicator. Lieutenant Vex, report to the bridge immediately. We've got incoming. Dara shot Marcus a final glare before exiting the room, locking the door behind her. The calm before the storm. In the silent confines of his cell, Marcus allowed himself a faint smile. He'd been through countless interrogations, and the Empire's methods were no different from any others. The moment they arrested him, they'd set the clock ticking on their own downfall. As the Imperial Dawn prepared for the unexpected threat approaching its position, Marcus began to assess his surroundings. The cell was standard Imperial design. Functional but not foolproof, the restraints were secure but not unbreakable, and he'd already spotted the subtle lapses in protocol among the guards. Patience, he reminded himself. Timing was everything. The Empire thought they had captured a rogue soldier. They had no idea. They were holding the galaxy's most feared hitman. The hum of the Imperial Dawn's engines reverberated through the sterile corridors of the ship as Marcus Kane sat motionless in the interrogation room. His wrists remained bound to the metal table, but his relaxed posture and faint smirk belied any sense of vulnerability. The room was quiet, save for the occasional crackle of the overhead lights and the distant murmur of crew activity beyond the reinforced walls. Lieutenant Dara Vex returned, her datapad in hand. This time, she wasn't alone. A pair of heavily armed guards stood by the door, their weapons at the ready. Marcus's sharp green eyes flicked toward them, his smirk growing wider. Expecting trouble, he asked. Dara ignored the comment and took a seat across from him. She activated the datapad, displaying a holographic interface that hovered between them. We've done some digging, she began, her tone colder than before. Your records are suspiciously incomplete, but we've uncovered enough. Marcus Kane, former sergeant of the Earth Federation Corps, specialized in deep cover operations. You were decorated during the asteroid wars, but everything went downhill after the Mars Rebellion. Dishonorably discharged for insubordination and suspected war crimes. Cared to elaborate? Marcus shrugged. The faint clinking of his restraints the only sound. War is messy, people make mistakes. War is also orderly. At least in the Empire, Dara countered. You didn't just make mistakes. You went rogue. And now, you've been spotted in some very inconvenient places. Delvaris is just the latest in a long list. You've left a trail of bodies and chaos in your wake. How do you explain that? Marcus leaned forward as far as the restraints allowed, his smirk fading into a more serious expression. I don't explain myself to anyone, especially not to some Empire lackey who thinks she knows how the galaxy works. Dara's eyes narrowed, her temper barely held in check. Let me spell it out for you. We've tied you to assassination, sabotage, and insurgencies in Imperial-controlled systems. The only reason you're not already in a black site is because Captain Thorne believes you might have intel we can use. But me? I don't think you're worth the oxygen you're breathing. Marcus chuckled, the sound low and mocking, You're wrong about one thing. You think you're in control here, but you're not. I'm exactly where I need to be." Dara leaned back, studying him carefully. There was something about his confidence that unsettled her. Marcus Kane wasn't a man afraid of consequences. He was a man who thrived on them. "You're playing a dangerous game," she said. Marcus smiled again, this time without humor. "I don't play games, Lieutenant. I win them." The alarm sounded. Before Dara could respond, the ship's klaxons blared, filling the interrogation room with a shrill, repetitive alarm. The guards exchanged uneasy glances, their grip on their weapons tightening. Dara stood abruptly, her hand moving instinctively to the blaster at her hip. "What's happening?" Marcus asked, his tone casual, almost amused. Dara ignored him and activated her communicator. "Vex to bridge, what's the situation?" Captain Thorne's voice crackled over the Channel Pirates. "A fleet just jumped out of hyperspace and is moving to engage. They're heavily armed. This isn't a random attack. Get to the command center immediately." Dara turned to the guard. "Stay here. Do not let him out of your sight." Marcus watched her leave, his expression unreadable. The guards repositioned themselves, their weapons pointed at him. He leaned back in his chair, his mind already working through the possibilities. Opportunity knocks. The Imperial Dawn shuddered as the first barrage of pirate fire struck. Its shields, the ship's defenses hummed to life. But the suddenness of the attack had thrown the crew into chaos. Marcus could feel it in the air. The barely concealed panic, the rushed movements, the cracks forming in the disciplined facade of the Imperial soldiers. He looked up at the guards, tense. "Isn't it?" "Shut up," one of them snapped. Marcus smiled faintly. "You should be paying attention to the bigger threat." The guard frowned. "What are you?" Before he could finish, the ship jolted violently, throwing both guards off balance. Marcus seized a moment. Using the hidden lockpick embedded in the sole of his boot, he freed himself from the restraints in a single fluid motion. The first guard barely had time to react before Marcus was on him, disarming him with a quick twist of the wrist and slamming him into the wall. The second guard raised his weapon, but Marcus was faster, using the first guard as a human shield before dispatching the second with a well-aimed strike. He stood over the unconscious guards, adjusting his jacket as if he'd just finished a casual workout. "You should have stayed alert," he muttered. Navigating the labyrinth, the ship's corridors were a maze of metal and shadow, but Marcus navigated them with each. Years of training and experience had honed his ability to move undetected through enemy territory. He avoided security cameras, slipped past patrols, and incapacitated any crew members who got too close. His first stop was the armory. He needed weapons and gear if he was going to survive. The chaos unfolding around in the armory was lightly guarded. Most of the crew were occupied with the pirate attack. Marcus quickly overpowered the lone sentry and equipped himself with a standard-issue blaster rifle, a utility belt, and a combat knife. As he moved deeper into the ship, he encountered Lieutenant Dara. Vex. She was alone, her blaster drawn, her expression a mix of anger and suspicion. "I knew you were trouble," she said, aiming her weapon at him. "You're not wrong," Marcus replied, his voice calm. "Drop the weapon and surrender. You won't get off the ship alive." Marcus tilted his head, his green eyes narrowing. "You're good, Lieutenant, but I'm better." Without warning, Dara fired. Marcus dodged, rolling into cover and returning fire. The corridor lit up with bursts of red energy as the two engaged in a fierce shootout. Dara's precision and training were evident, but Marcus's experience and improvisation gave him the edge. Using the environment to his advantage, Marcus disarmed her and delivered a swift blow to her temple, knocking her unconscious. He caught her before she hit the ground, lowering her gently. "Nothing personal," he said quietly before continuing toward the hangar. The escape. The hangar bay was in chaos. Pirate ships buzzed around the Imperial Dawn, their weapons pounding at the patrol ship's shields. Marcus spotted a sleek Imperial scout ship and made his move. He sprinted across the hangar, dodging stray blaster fire and ducking behind crates. A pair of troopers tried to stop him, but he dispatched them with ruthless efficiency. Reaching the scout ship, he climbed aboard and powered it up, the engines roaring to life. As the scout ship lifted off, Marcus activated the ship's comm system. "This is Marcus Kane. Consider this my resignation." The scout ship shot out of the hangar, weaving through the chaos of the battle before disappearing into hyperspace. Unfinished business. Back aboard the Imperial Dawn, Dara woke in the medbay, her head throbbing. She sat up abruptly, ignoring the protests of the medical droid tending to her wounds. Captain Thorne stormed in, his expression livid. "What the hell happened?" "He escaped," Dara said, her voice steady despite the frustration boiling beneath the surface. "You let him escape?" Thorne bellowed. Dara met his glare with unwavering determination. "No, I underestimated him, we all did, but I'll bring him back." Thorne clenched his fists. "You better, because now we have more than a rogue soldier on our hands. We've unleashed a ghost." As the Imperial Dawn limped away from the battle, Marcus Kane was already planning his next move. For him, this was just the beginning. The Imperial Dawn limped back to a secure Imperial stronghold in the Andralis sector. Its hull scarred from the pirate attack, the loss of Marcus. Kane weighed heavily on Lieutenant Duravex. She replayed the encounter over and over in her mind, analyzing every misstep, every oversight. This wasn't just about her pride. It was about the threat Kane represented. In the command briefing room, Captain Thorne stood before a holographic map of the sector. Imperial officers gathered around, their faces grim. "Kane is no ordinary fugitive," Thorne began. "He's a trained killer, a master of evasion, and a threat to the stability of the Empire. His escape wasn't just a failure. It was a disaster." Dara clenched her jaw but said nothing. Thorne's words were true, but they stung nonetheless. "Our intelligence suggests that Kane has ties to insurgent groups operating in the Outer Rim," Thorne continued. "He's likely to regroup and strike again. Lieutenant Vex, you're leading the retrieval team. This time, failure is not an option." "Yes," Sir Dara replied, her voice firm. Thorne's gaze softened slightly. "You've seen him up close. You understand how dangerous he is. Use that to your advantage." Dara nodded. Already planning her next steps, Kane had slipped through her fingers once, but she wouldn't let it happen again. Kane's next move. Marcus Kane sat in the cockpit of the stolen Imperial scout ship, the faint hum of hyperspace travel filling the cabin. He leaned back in the pilot's chair, his hands resting lightly on the controls. His escape from the Imperial Dawn had gone exactly as planned, but he knew the Empire wouldn't let him go easily. He activated the ship's navicomputer. Pulling up a star map of the Outer Rim, Delvars had been a temporary refuge, but now he needed something more strategic, a place where he could disappear completely while continuing his work. The planet Draxos caught his eye, a lawless world on the edge of the galaxy. It was a haven for smugglers, mercenaries, and outcasts. Perfect. As the ship dropped out of hyperspace, Draxos loomed ahead. Its surface was a patchwork of jagged mountains, sprawling deserts, and neon-lit cities. Marcus guided the scout ship into the atmosphere, heading for the largest settlement, Haven's End. The underworld welcomes him. Haven's End was a chaotic sprawl of towering skyscrapers, cramped alleyways, and bustling marketplaces. The air was thick with the scent of engine grease, spice, food, and desperation. It was a place where credit spoke louder than morals, and everyone had a price. Marcus navigated the crowded streets, blending in seamlessly with the other denizens. His utility jacket and unassuming demeanor made him just another face in the crowd. But beneath the surface, his sharp eyes missed nothing. He found what he was looking for in a dimly lit cantina nestled between two towering buildings. The establishment was noisy and packed with patrons, its walls adorned with glowing holoscreens advertising everything from weapons to illicit goods. Marcus approached the bar, catching the attention of a grizzled barkeep with a cybernetic arm. "Looking for someone," Marcus said, sliding a handful of credits across the counter. The barkeep eyed the credits before pocketing them. "Who?" "Laris Cade." The barkeep's expression darkened. "Cade doesn't like strangers asking questions." "Good thing I'm not a stranger," Marcus replied. The barkeep hesitated, then jerked his head toward a door at the back of the cantina. Marcus nodded in thanks and made his way through the crowd. An old ally. Laris Cade was a weapons dealer and information broker with a reputation for discretion. And Greed Marcus had worked with him before, back when his assignments required tools that couldn't be acquired through official channels. Cade's office was cluttered with crates of blasters, explosives, and other contraband. The man himself was seated behind a desk. A cigar clamped between his teeth, he was short and stocky, his cybernetic eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Well, Cade said as Marcus entered, if it isn't the ghost of the Federation, didn't expect to see you alive, Kane. Neither did the Empire, Marcus replied, taking a seat across from him. Cade chuckled, puffing out a cloud of smoke. What brings you to my humble establishment? Information and supplies, Marcus said. I need a clean identity, safe passage off this rock, and a way to stay ahead of the Empire. Cade leaned back, his expression thoughtful. That's a tall order. The Empire's got deep pockets, and they're not shy about spending them to catch people like you. Marcus slid a small data chip across the desk. Consider this an incentive. Cade inserted the chip into a reader, his eyes widening as he scanned the contents. This is Imperial encryption data. Where the hell did you get this? Don't ask questions you don't want answers to, Marcus said. Cade grinned. Fair enough, I can get you what you need, but it'll take time. Meanwhile, you should lay low. The Empire's been sniffing around lately, and they're not the only ones interested in you. Marcus's expression darkened. Who else? Rumor has it some bounty hunters have picked up your trail. Big names. Too seems there's a hefty price on your head. Marcus stood, his hand resting lightly on the blaster at his side. Let them come. The Empire closes in. Back on the Imperial Dawn, Dara Vex studied the latest intelligence reports. The stolen scout ship had been tracked to Draxos, and Imperial probes had confirmed Marcus's presence in Haven's End. Do we engage? Thorne asked, standing beside her in the briefing room. Dara nodded. He's vulnerable on Draxos. The chaos works both ways. If we move quickly, we can corner him before he disappears again. Thorne considered her words before giving a curt nod. Take a strike team, bring him back alive, if you can, dead if you must. Dara saluted and left the room, her mind focused on the task ahead. This time, she wouldn't let Kane slip away. The final confrontation. Marcus was in the middle of finalizing his arrangements with Cade when the first explosion rocked Havens. Andy spun around, his blaster drawn, as the distant sound of shouting and weapons fire reached his ears. The Empire, Cade muttered, already moving to secure his stash. Marcus cursed under his breath. He had expected bounty hunters, not a full Imperial strike team. He grabbed the identity chip Cade had prepared and slipped it into his pocket. Thanks for the help, Marcus said. Just don't lead them back here, Cade replied, locking the door behind Marcus as he left. The streets of Haven's End were Chaos Imperial troopers moved in coordinated squads. Their blasters cutting down anyone who resisted. Civilians ran for cover, while mercenaries and gang members fired back from makeshift barricades. Marcus moved through the chaos, like a ghost avoiding direct confrontation, while making his way toward the city's spaceport. His goal was simple: get off Draxos and vanish again. But as he rounded a corner, he found himself face-to-face with Lieutenant Dara Vex. You're out of options, Kane, Dara said, her blaster trained on him. Marcus smirked, his own weapon pointed at her. I never run out of options. The standoff lasted only a moment before the chaos around them forced their hands. They fired simultaneously, their shots missing as they dodged for cover. The chase was on. Dara pursued Marcus through the labyrinthine streets, her determination unwavering. Marcus used every trick in his arsenal to evade her, but she was relentless. Finally, they reached the edge of the spaceport. Marcus turned to face Dara, his blaster aimed steadily at her. You're good, Lieutenant, he said, but this isn't your fight. It is now, Dara replied. For a moment, neither moved, then with a nod of respect, Marcus turned and disappeared into the crowd, boarding a departing freighter just as it lifted off. Dara watched him go, her fists clenched in frustration. The hunt wasn't over. Not by a long shot.